Hey guys, today we're in the book of 1 Kings chapter 20. Now Elijah has been told to go anoint a new king of Syria, a new king of Israel, and a new prophet Elisha. And we pick up today with kind of what's going on in the middle of him going to Syria, Israel, and Elisha. So we kind of seen yesterday what he's supposed to do, and now this is going on while Elijah is traveling. And we see here that the king of Syria, Ben-Hadad, this is not the new one that he's going to anoint, this is the old one. But the king of Syria says, hey, I'm going to go against Israel. I'm going to battle Israel. So he sends a letter to King Ahab through some messengers and say, here's the deal. I'm coming. I want everything. I want all the gold, all the silver, all your women, all your children. I want everything. Well, King Ahab knows that Syria is a bigger, better army. And so what does he do? He basically surrenders. Verse 4, he says, I am yours in all that I have. Then, because he surrendered, Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, sends another letter through some messengers and says, well, here's the deal. I'm going to take everything, as you said, but also I'm coming into your house. I'm coming to your palace. I'm coming into all the houses and all the palaces of all of your leaders, of your generals, of your officials, everybody in the government, and I'm going to take whatever I want. Well, King Ahab knows he messed up, right? He surrendered. He has no dog in this fight. He's no way to say. And now, because he surrendered so easy, Ben-Hadad's coming in and saying, I'm taking everything. Well, King Ahab doesn't like that. And so what does he do? He calls all of his officials together. Verse 7, he called all the elders together and tells them exactly what has happened. And his officials tell him, do not listen or consent. Do not surrender. This man is a big bully. You can't do this. If you surrender, he's going to want everything. But King Ahab sends another letter or messengers back to King Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, and he says, hey, I will do the first. I will give you all the gold, the silver, the women, and the children, but I draw the line at coming into my house and the houses of all my officials, all of my elders, all of my generals, and picking out whatever you want. That's not going to happen. And then Ben-Hadad sends him a letter and says, the gods do so to me, more also, if the dust of Samaria shall suffice for handfuls of people. Notice this is kind of the same line that we've seen with Jezebel saying about Elijah. May the gods do something to me horrible if I don't go through this. It's the same kind of language, but the king of Syria says, well, that's not going to work because the gods are going to get me if I don't come and do everything. So he said, I'm coming. I'm going to waylay Israel. And we see at the end, verse 13, it says that they took their position against the city. Verse 12. And so now here they are already, Syria's ready to come against war of Israel, those 10 northern tribes, and take whatever they want. Now we get a brief little window of as Assyria is moving down and surrounding Israel, something happens. Behold, a prophet came near to King Ahab. Now, this is not Elijah. This is not Elisha. This would have been one of the 7,000. We don't know his name. We have no idea what prophet this is, but it's a prophet of the Lord. And so he comes to King Ahab because God has a message for Ahab. He has a message for this king who, even though he's not listening to him, he still has a message for him. And he says, behold, I will give it into your hand this day, and you shall know that I am the Lord. He tells him, hey, behold, I'm going to give you Syria. Even though Syria has more people, he has all these kings, all these soldiers, I'm going to give you Syria so that you will know I am God. You will know that I am the one. And so Israel summons up 7,000 people. Now that seems a lot to us, but compared to Syria, Syria would have had hundreds of thousands of people. So even though they have 7,000, that's doesn't really mean anything. And so Israel, King Ahab, goes against Syria. They go to battle, and basically they take them over. They do exactly what God says. They come, they take them, and it talks about the Assyrians fled. Israel pursued them, and Israel wins this war. Okay, and everybody's, yay, they're cheering, they're happy. But this prophet comes back to King Ahab and says, now listen, you need to go, you need to replenish, you need to regroup, because in the spring, Syria is going to attack Israel again, right? So all this is going to happen again. So God gave King Ahab a prophecy of what's to happen in the future. And just as God predicted, in the spring, Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, gets all of his troops together and they come against Israel. But this time they do something different. Last time they fought in the hill country. And so King Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, says, well, you know, their God might like the hills. So let's keep it in the plains, right? He didn't want to say that Baal is less of a god, right? He didn't want to say that he's less of a king. His men are less than Israel. He blamed it on a spiritual force, right? So he said, hey, let's keep it in the plains. Don't take it to the hills because they control the hills. Their gods are good gods in the hills. Let's keep it in the plains where we can win. And that's exactly what they do, except for God, being God, knows this, and he sends a prophet back to Ben-Hadad, and he says, hey, here's what's going to happen, right? They say that your God is the God of the hills. Well, I'm the God of everything, so we're going to defeat them in the valleys, right? We're going to defeat them in the plains. And that's exactly what happens. So once again, God gives Israel the win. They defeat over 100,000-foot soldiers and then 27,000 soldiers a couple days later in the city of Ephek. And so they win and everybody is, yay, it's good. But here's what's interesting. As Israel's won the war and they basically have Ben-Hadad has, they have him kind of surrounded, and King Ahab comes out and says, hey, is your king still alive? And they're like, well, yeah, he is. He's kind of locked himself in the city back here. And King Ahab says, no, bring him out. He's my brother. Verse 32, he's my brother. And he said, bring him out and we'll sign a peace treaty. I don't want to kill him. Let's keep him alive. And that's exactly what he does. They sign this peace treaty. In verse 34, it says they sign a covenant, right? Now we're not sure, but if you're going to ask my explanation, King Ahab, as well as King Ben-Hadad, they know what's going on. In the eastern part of the world, there's a country called Assyria. And they're growing bigger and bigger. They're basically taking over the whole world. And so they're kind of needing one another to try to defeat or to at least push away Assyria in coming into Syria and to Israel. So King Ahab doesn't kill the king of Syria, Ben-Hadad, even though he came against him twice, and even though he's trying to steal everything from Israel. No, he befriends him and makes a peace treaty with him, which is crazy, but that's what he does. Notice King Ahab only cares about himself, right? That's the whole point. And then later on, we see in verse 35 this weird story. A prophet, we don't know his name, we have no idea who this is, but a prophet goes to his neighbor and says, hey, hit me in my face. And the neighbor says, no, I'm not going to hit you in your face. And he says, no, God says, hit me in my face. And he says, I'm not doing it. And so the prophet says, well, you're going to get eaten by a lion. And that's exactly what happens. And then the prophet goes to another neighbor and says, hey, hit me in my face. And that neighbor, boom, all right, hits him in his face, just messes his face all up. And so now this prophet waits for King Ahab to do this parade through a town, and he wraps himself up in bandages, covering his eyes, which is why he needed to be hit in his face. And as King Ahab is making his way, this prophet tells him a story, much like prophets do. And this prophet says, hey, I have a story for you. He says, one of your soldiers was watching a man, but he had something to do. So he told me to watch this man, and if I don't, he will hurt me, but if he does, he'll pay me. And this soldier goes away, and I forget about this guy, and I just let this guy go. And King Ahab, being right, he says, well, you are guilty. You let this man go. You should have held on to him. And this prophet, it quickly takes off his bandages, and he says, you are the same as me. You are the same as this man. God put Ben-Hadad into your hands and said, hold on to him and take care of him, but you let him go. You signed a peace treaty. You should have killed the enemy, but instead you signed a peace treaty with the enemy. And so now this prophet says, now I have devoted you, God has devoted King Ahab to destruction. God says, now I will kill you because you let Ben-Hadad go. And so now chapter 19 makes a little bit more sense. Why would God tell Elijah to go and to anoint a new king of Syria and a new king of Israel? Well, it's because God already knew the future. God knew exactly what was going to happen, and he was going to take care of the king of Syria and the king of Israel. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense. And we will see you tomorrow in chapter 21. God bless.